All right, so thank you, Amr, not just for that great talk, but for setting me up beautifully for my talk. So AragonChain. Before we get into AragonChain, I should probably give a brief background on what Aragon is. So Aragon is an Ethereum-based project, and the mission of Aragon is to empower users to freely organize and collaborate without borders or intermediaries. One of the driving principles of Aragon is the freedom to organize is a basic human right, and they base all of their work around those tenets. So Aragon organizations, backpedaling a second, Aragon allows users to deploy their own sovereign organizations on the Ethereum blockchain, and it comes with built-in governance mechanisms. And these organizations are sovereign and censorship resistant. And the final thing I should mention about Aragon is Aragon 1, which is an organization which is tasked with building the tools and community for Aragon. So, what is AragonChain? In a sentence, AragonChain is a custom blockchain under construction by ChainSafe using Ethermint. But the better question is, why AragonChain? Aragon is committed to delivering maximum value to its community, and at the genesis of Aragon, Ethereum was by far the best option and potentially the only real option to build Aragon on. Since then, a lot of things have changed in the space. We've seen the rise of application-specific blockchains, and then on the Ethereum network, obviously transaction costs continue to increase. That can be seen as a good thing because of more adoption, but it can be tough for applications operating on Ethereum. Specific to Aragon, the Istanbul hard fork broke close to 5,000 Aragon contracts. And so that was a lot for them to deal with. The Aragon community understands that Istanbul was good for Ethereum, but it didn't end up being good for Aragon. And then a final thing is that the future of Ethereum, like all blockchains, remains unpredictable. And other options have now become available that would give Aragon a little bit more control over their future. So out of this came the idea for AragonChain. And this all started last year in Berlin at Blockchain Week. Some of the Aragon folks started talking to us about this idea for an alternate chain bespoke to the Aragon use case. And they really wanted to focus in on creating a chain that could allow for lower fees and potentially for faster scalability. So I wanted to sort of walk you through the process by which we came to be building AragonChain, because it's far from typical, and I think it's a really great demonstration of some of what blockchain can do for communities. So, usually when we get a contract from another company, it's a bilateral relationship. There are negotiations between ourselves and the other party. Then we sign a contract and we start the work. This was far from how AragonChain came to be. In September of 2019, after these initial talks in Berlin, Aragon 1 commissioned ChainSafe to write a feasibility report for this potential chain. And so in October of that year, we delivered the feasibility report, and it was published on GitHub, and then the Aragon community at large was allowed weeks to sort of peruse it, see what they thought of it, weigh the different options that the report created, and then that brings us to later on in October, where ChainSafe submitted a Aragon governance proposal, AGP 106. This is through their governance mechanism that I touched on earlier. And the proposal was to build AragonChain. And part of the proposal was that AragonChain would be built using Ethermint. The other major contender was the Polkadot network. There are a number of reasons why the final decision was made, but the primary one was just timeline. Ethermint is ready to go now. An Ethereum compatible parachain for Cosmos has not yet been built, and so they would have had to wait significantly longer on that network. So by early November, that round of voting for the process had closed, and the answer was a resounding yes. So it was one of several proposals that were voted upon, and it was approved by the community, right? I want to emphasize that again. Not just by Aragon 1, but by the entire Aragon community. Anyone with tokens could vote on this. And so it was a community-driven initiative, not just coming from like one company. And so this wasn't the end to the community aspect of this process. In January 2020, we published the specification for AragonChain, and we again made this public on their GitHub for the community's approval. And we got some awesome feedback on it, and people who wanted to maybe comment on the spec or even suggest changes were allowed to do so through GitHub. And that brings us to February 2020. We are currently building AragonChain using Ethermint, and it is awesome. Okay, so let's get into some technical details. AragonChain will be built by implementing existing Aragon smart contracts from Ethereum and some other associated components on Ethermint. So this migration in and of itself is not going to be too tricky. It should be fairly straightforward, but aspects of it are definitely going to require some modifications. As Amr touched on, because Ethermint is a module and it's part of a larger system, we have to play by some of these Cosmos rules that aren't necessarily directly applicable to the systems that were set up originally in Ethereum. So the work has consisted of a lot of sort of copying over and then troubleshooting and seeing what works immediately and what needs to be tweaked and altered before it works as it should, or as it does on Ethereum mainnet. And a really important thing to point out here is that Aragon will not drop Ethereum support. Aragon has always been huge proponents of Ethereum, they continue to be, and Aragon on Ethereum will continue to exist. There are no plans for that to ever end. And key aspects of the Aragon ecosystem, such as Aragon Court and Aragon Network v1, are still deployed on Ethereum mainnet and intend to remain there. So that kind of begs the question, okay, if we've got Aragon on Ethereum mainnet, and we then have AragonChain as a Cosmos on Ethermint, how can these two connected but separate ecosystems communicate? And that brings us to ChainBridge. So in addition to the migration, a big part of this project and a big part of the specification was a bridge between AragonChain and Aragon on Ethereum. So the bridge enables data and value to be transferred both ways, and currently it is a trusted bridge, but we plan on transitioning it to a trustless system. We just want to get the functionality going now, but we will move towards that with time. So an important thing to point out is that data passed along the bridge can trigger actions on AragonChain that were initiated on Ethereum. And this is really important because it allows anyone with an organization deployed on AragonChain will be able to leverage the utility of Aragon Court, which remains on Ethereum mainnet, using this bridge. And so the court remains extra secure because it's on Ethereum, it's a larger network effect, but its functionality can still be enjoyed by those who are using AragonChain because of this bridge. Yeah, the final thing on ChainBridge is that it's going to eventually allow interoperation between many networks beyond just Ethereum and Cosmos. And the first networks that we're targeting are Ethereum Classic and then substrate-based chains, so Polkadot. So upon the first iteration of this bridge being released, those 4 networks will all become interoperable. Pretty awesome. So I'm almost done, but I just wanted to tie this all back to Amr's presentation, and it's just really exciting for us that we built Ethermint, and then we got to build AragonChain on top of it, just months afterwards. So it's great to see our software actually being used by us in this case, but for a lot of people. And this all sort of goes back to the trade-offs and the benefits that Amr was talking about. So flexibility, AragonChain is no longer limited by someone else's architecture. It's highly customizable. It's not beholden to the needs of other projects on Ethereum. And it can follow a predictable scaling journey rather than not so predictable. Then we have performance, as Amr touched on. We have instant finality and proof of stake right away out of the box. We can optimize opcodes more, and we do plan on doing this in later iterations of AragonChain. And then again, the native code can be used, and that is a big, can be a big benefit for developers as well. Sovereignty, obviously, we've touched on already. Yeah, so again, here, this is my email, my Twitter, and we are happy. Yeah, thank you. Questions?
Okay, so not to be that guy, but a lot of the talk here, you mentioned how using Cosmos, you're able to build application-specific chains, which then can be more performative because they're application-specific. And at the same time, in making Ethereum or the EVM compatible, there are a number of issues that need to be addressed so that it can work. If it is so good at being able to build an application-specific chain, why isn't the EVM the application that you're specifically building to that it's so well customized for? I guess that's the piece that I'm sort of wondering. If it's such a good solution for building application-specific things, why isn't the EVM an application that it's so good to build for? You know what I mean?
So do you mean it would be easier to just spin up a blockchain based on the EVM, not using Cosmos?
No, I don't understand why you've mentioned a number of times that using the EVM fully isn't such a great fit for Cosmos.
I understand.
And it seems like, oh, okay, but I thought it was application specific, so it should be, this is the application.
Right.
So why shouldn't that?
I guess it's a relatively new system. The implementation itself has hiccups like any implementation, but I guess the idea is that now that it is implemented, anyone who builds on Ethereum can come and build, and it will be much easier. So for us to migrate AragonChain is trivial compared to the work that it took to create the Ethermint module in the first place. So yes, initially there was legwork, and all of this technology is relatively new, so I think that's where a lot of the difficulty came from. But having this EVM-based thing means that we can easily migrate stuff over from Ethereum, and so that process itself becomes a lot more painless. Does that sort of answer? Okay, we can chat more later.
Yeah.
Anyone else before we move on? Awesome.